Before we start, we need to warn you about what you're going to hear. This story is for learning and fun only. This is exactly what happened in a real court case about Sean Diddy Combs, as told by Inner City Press. What happens when the person you trust to cut your hair becomes the one who tells your secrets? What did CD's haircutter hear during their private times together that made the music star fall apart? And why are the lawyers calling this story the last piece that finishes the whole puzzle? In a courtroom where Sean Diddy Combs is facing serious charges, Marcus Johnson walked in as a surprise, not as a famous person, not as an expert, but as a barber. A man who spent 15 years giving perfect haircuts to one of music's most powerful people while quietly listening to everything being said around him. And then came the big shock notebooks with detailed stories about phone calls, private talks, and confessions made while Diddy sat in the barber's chair, thinking he was in a safe place. Were these just casual comments or proof of bad things? Marcus didn't speak through guessing or rumors. He spoke through years of written observations, and those observations were enough to make Diddy fall apart, his calm face finally breaking as his head fell into his hands. Why would Marcus Johnson risk everything, his famous clients, his good name, maybe even his safety, by speaking against one of his most famous customers? What made him break the special trust between barber and customer? And what exactly did he write down over those 15 years that had Diddy's lawyers frantically asking for a break the moment Marcus pulled out his records? This isn't just another witness story. It's a never-before-seen look into the private world of a man who reportedly kept his inner circle tightly controlled. The full story, raw and unfiltered, begins with Marcus Johnson's testimony, and what he revealed will make sure you never see the power of quiet watchers the same way again. If you're finding this information helpful, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more breaking updates as this story continues to happen. I'm standing outside the Manhattan Federal Courthouse where one of the most unexpected moments in this big trial has just happened. Moments ago, Marcus Johnson, the longtime personal barber to Sean Diddy Combs, came out of these doors after giving testimony that people watching in the courtroom are describing as crushing, and the testimony nobody saw coming. His face looked serious, almost sorry, as he was walked to a waiting car by federal guards. Unlike the celebrities and business people who have testified before him, Johnson wasn't surrounded by a group of helpers or legal team. He was alone, a regular person suddenly pushed into the center of one of the biggest criminal cases in entertainment history. Inside the courtroom, the feeling changed dramatically when Johnson took the stand. What had been another step-by-step day of technical testimony turned into something far more personal and revealing. Johnson didn't just share what he knew. He brought 15 years of careful notes documenting conversations he heard while cutting Diddy's hair. Nobody expected Marcus Johnson to be the one to do this. The room fell completely silent when his name was called. Eyes focused on the entrance until a man in a simple button-up shirt and pants walked in. No designer suit, no flashy accessories, just a barber who had been a constant, nearly invisible presence in Diddy's inner circle for over 10 years. Until that moment, Marcus had been seen as just a service provider, someone who appeared in the background of Instagram photos, occasionally tagged in posts about fresh cuts before big events. But something had changed. Maybe it was the weight of what he knew. Maybe it was the growing evidence against Diddy from other sources. Maybe it was his own conscience after years of saying nothing. Whatever it was, Marcus Johnson was done being silent. He wasn't testifying as a celebrity or industry insider. He was there as a man who had been in the room during countless private moments, who had been treated as invisible while powerful people spoke freely, who had heard things that were never meant to reach the court. And when he began to speak, the courtroom wasn't prepared for the level of detail he would provide. Because what Marcus revealed about conversations, phone calls, meetings, and late-night confessions wasn't just shocking. It was carefully documented. This wasn't someone remembering vague memories or feelings. This was a man who had kept detailed records of dates, times, participants, and exact statements written down immediately after each appointment over 15 years. "I've been cutting hair since I was 14 years old, Marcus began, his voice steady but quiet. "In my job, clients talk. They forget you're there. But I always remember, and I always listened. The judge leaned forward. Diddy's attorneys looked at each other with worry, but it was Diddy himself whose reaction told the real story, the color draining from his face as he realized just how much his barber had heard. It started like any other day of the trial. The room buzzed with the usual pre-testimony conversations. The press prepared their notes and lawyers arranged their documents as they waited for what was expected to be testimony from a money expert about money transfers. But when the guard called Marcus Johnson instead, the room changed. Could hear a pin drop. Some people looked confused, checking their notes to see if they'd missed this name on the witness list. But the prosecutor's confident expression suggested this witness had been held back. A strategic surprise. The judge raised an eyebrow, and Diddy, who'd been keeping his calm behavior throughout the trial, suddenly straightened in his chair, his expression shifting from professional attention to clear recognition. Marcus walked directly to the witness stand, his steps measured and deliberate. He glanced briefly at Diddy, not with anger or victory, but with something that looked almost like an apology. "For the record, please state your job," the prosecutor began. After the oath was given, "I'm a barber," Marcus replied. "Own Johnson's Precision Cuts in Brooklyn now, but for 15 years. I was mainly known as Sean Combs' personal barber." Their work relationship, Marcus testified, began in 2008. He was working at an upscale shop in Manhattan when Diddy's previous barber was not available before an important event. What was supposed to be a one-time appointment turned into a regular arrangement, and eventually Marcus became Diddy's only barber, traveling with him for major events and coming to his homes for weekly appointments. "In the beginning, it was just about the haircuts," Marcus explained. "I was focused on proving myself, showing I deserved the opportunity. Mr. Combs is very particular about his appearance. He described how the relationship evolved over time. After about 6 months, I became invisible in a way. Not as a person, Mr. Combs was always respectful to me directly, but invisible in the sense that he and others would speak freely while I was working as if I wasn't there." Marcus explained that this wasn't unusual in his job. Barbers, like bartenders, hear things. It's part of the job. Most clients eventually forget to filter themselves, but most clients aren't having the kinds of conversations Mr. Combs was having. He detailed how his services expanded from Diddy's homes to his offices, studios, even hotel rooms while traveling. Wherever he was, if he needed a cut or touch-up, I was called. Sometimes it was just us. Sometimes there were other people present. Business associates, artists, security personnel. The important moment, according to Marcus's testimony, came in 2010 during a session at Diddy's Manhattan apartment. He was on the phone while I was cutting his hair. A heated conversation. When he finished, he told me, "Marcus, you never heard that it was the first time he directly said that I was hearing sensitive information." That night, Marcus testified. He started keeping notes. It wasn't about gathering dirt or evidence. It was self-protection. I was hearing things that made me uncomfortable, and I thought if there was ever a situation where I was accused of something, I'd have my own record of what actually happened. The notes began as simple entries in a small notebook, dates, general topics of conversation, who was present. But as years passed and Marcus witnessed more concerning interactions, the documentation became more detailed. I started writing everything down as soon as I left each appointment, word for word when I could remember it. I kept these records in a safe deposit box separate from my home or business. When asked why he kept this practice for so many years, Marcus's answer was straightforward: because early on I heard Mr. Combs talk about people who had betrayed his trust. The consequences sounded severe. I realized I was in a position where I knew too much, but leaving suddenly might raise suspicions. So I stayed, kept cutting hair, and kept writing. Marcus described the growing unease he felt as the years passed. There were conversations about handling problems, discussions about people who had disappeared from the industry after conflicts with Mr. Combs, phone calls where he instructed people to make it go away or teach them what loyalty means. He testified that around 2018 he began to fear for his own safety. The things I was hearing had escalated. There were clear threats being made about people who were scheduled to testify in various legal matters. There were discussions about watching people and blackmail. I realized I had become a liability simply by being present. The courtroom remained utterly silent as Marcus explained his decision to eventually come forward. When the federal investigation became public, I knew it was only a matter of time before someone mentioned my name. I had been in the room for too many sensitive conversations. I decided that approaching authorities first was safer than waiting to be found. His voice remained steady as he concluded this portion of his testimony. I'm not here because I want to be. I'm here because after 15 years of hearing things no one should hear, staying silent feels like becoming part of it. I've kept silent for a long time, Marcus said, shifting slightly in the witness chair. I've built a successful business. I've worked with celebrities and executives who trusted me, but none of that outweighs what I heard and what I know happened as a result of conversations that took place while I was cutting hair. He turned slightly toward Diddy. In your chair, Marcus told the court that the true nature of what he was witnessing unfolded gradually. It began with seemingly innocent business conversations, negotiations, contract discussions, marketing strategies. But over time, the tone and content darkened. Around 2012, Mr. Combs began receiving a particular type of call during our sessions. Marcus testified he had a specific ringtone for these calls, and whenever it sounded, he would tell anyone else in the room to leave. But I was allowed to stay because, as he once put it, Marcus doesn't count. These calls, according to Marcus, often involved what Diddy referred to as cleanup situations, problems that needed to be handled quietly and completely. I remember a call in August 2013 very clearly, Marcus continued. Looking at his notes, Mr. Combs was getting a shape-up before a video shoot. Phew. His phone rang with that specific tone. He answered and said, "Tell me it's handled." He listened for a moment, then said, "I don't care what it takes. Pay them, threaten them, whatever. That footage cannot surface." Marcus detailed how after that call, Diddy had been visibly upset. He made a second call immediately after. He said, "The situation isn't resolved. Handle it personally then." He looked at me and said, "Good thing you're not the talking type, right, Marcus?" It wasn't really a question. The testimony then shifted to what prosecutors described as pattern evidence. Similar conversations that occurred repeatedly over the years. Marcus described how Diddy would regularly discuss what he called his insurance policies on various industry figures. He talked about having something on everyone who matters. It was presented as smart business, as protection. He'd say things like, "That's why no one ever crosses me twice," or "That's why I can make one call and get what I want." According to Marcus, these insurance policies weren't just business leverage, but were actively used to control people and situations. In 2016, there was an artist who was planning to testify in a contract dispute. Marcus recounted, "I was cutting Mr. Combs' hair at his Miami home when he received an update about this. He made a call and said, 'Remind him about New Year's Eve 2014. Tell him we still have the video.'" 3 days later, I saw on the news that the artist had withdrawn from the case citing personal reasons. Marcus' documentation wasn't limited to Diddy's phone calls. He also recorded conversations between Diddy and visitors who came to meetings during his haircut appointments. There was a security consultant who would come regularly. They would discuss watching operations, who was being watched, what had been captured. They talked about hidden cameras in hotel rooms, in private homes, even in bathrooms at certain clubs and restaurants. They referred to a server where everything was stored, something they called the archive. The most damning testimony came when Marcus described what he called the panic period, a 3-month span in 2019 when Diddy allegedly became concerned about potential legal exposure. Mr. Combs had a series of meetings with a man he referred to only as the cleaner. I was doing weekly touch-ups during this time, and this individual was present for at least 4 of these sessions. They discussed removing evidence, creating alibis, and ensuring the silence of multiple people. Marcus testified that during one of these meetings he heard clear discussion of threats and intimidation tactics. The cleaner said, "Some people don't respond to money incentives." Mr. Combs replied, "Then find what they do respond to. Everyone has a pressure point. Family, career, reputation. Find it and press until they break." The courtroom remained utterly silent as Marcus recounted how he had become increasingly fearful for his own safety during this period. I realized that I had become a significant liability. I knew names, dates, details of things that were potentially criminal. The only thing protecting me was Mr. Combs' belief that I either wasn't paying attention or wouldn't dare speak about what I'd heard. When asked by prosecutors why he would allow such sensitive conversations to occur in his presence, Marcus' assessment was straightforward. I was part of the furniture to him. Barbers exist in a strange space. We're intimately close to our clients, literally holding sharp objects near their faces and necks. Yet we're often treated as if we're not fully present as people. Mr. Combs trusted me with his image, but he never considered that I might be listening, understanding, and remembering. Marcus then revealed that his documentation went beyond written notes. In the later years, concerned for his own protection, he had occasionally recorded sessions. I know it's not typically legal to record without permission, he acknowledged. But I had reached a point where I was hearing about actions that I believed were crimes, and I was afraid that without proof, I might become a loose end to be tied up. These recordings, which Marcus had turned over to federal investigators, included conversations about witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and what Diddy allegedly referred to as his cleanup fund money set aside specifically for handling potential legal and personal problems. On September 17, 2021, I recorded a conversation where Mr. Combs instructed someone to make sure she gets the message about what happens to people who break the family code. He then specified that the message should be convincing but not traceable. I knew then that I was potentially witnessing the planning of a crime. As Marcus' testimony continued, Diddy's calm courtroom behavior began to visibly crack. What had started as a slight tightening of his jaw had progressed to pale, clenched fists. By the time Marcus described the cleanup fund courtroom, reporters noted that Diddy was sweating heavily, his legal team passing him notes that he seemed too distracted to read. Marcus testified that he followed Diddy into the media room of his Hamptons estate, believing he was going to discuss a new style for an upcoming awards show. Instead, what he saw shook him to the core. There was a wall of monitors. Some showed security feeds from around the property, which seemed normal, but others were displaying what looked like footage from private moments, intimate situations, arguments, people appearing drunk or impaired. Mr. Combs was reviewing this footage with a technical specialist who was helping categorize and archive everything. Marcus paused, visibly uncomfortable with the memory. I didn't know how to react, and that was the point. Once you see something like that, you're part of it just by knowing about it. Marcus continued, his voice steady but subdued. A month after witnessing the surveillance system, he received a text message from an unknown number. All it said was, "Loyalty is everything in this business. Ask your other clients." Attached was a photo of Marcus entering the home of another hip-hop client, a rapper who was known to be in conflict with Diddy at the time. I understood immediately that I was being watched too. That I wasn't just the barber anymore. I was someone who needed to be monitored and controlled. This pattern of subtle intimidation continued. Marcus would occasionally find gifts in his car, expensive watches, envelopes of cash, tickets to exclusive events with notes saying simply, "Appreciation for your discretion." These weren't gifts, Marcus explained to the court. They were reminders that he could access my personal space anytime, that nothing was private. The strategy, as Marcus described it to the court, evolved over the years. What began as treating him like he was invisible shifted to making him part of it through knowledge, then to outright intimidation, and finally to what Marcus called the ownership phase. By 2020, Mr. Combs no longer tried to hide the nature of his operations from me. Instead, he began to actively include me in discussions, asking my opinion about how someone looked nervous or whether I thought someone was being truthful. It was as if he decided that making me participate, even in small ways, would ensure my silence. Marcus described how Diddy began introducing him to others as the most trusted man in the room, a phrase that carried a hidden threat rather than a compliment. He would tell people, "Marcus knows all my secrets, don't you?" while maintaining eye contact that communicated exactly what would happen if I ever shared those secrets. This evolution from invisibility to forced participation extended beyond Marcus. He witnessed similar patterns with household staff, drivers, and personal assistants. There was a system. First, you were tested with small wrongdoings being present during drug use or overhearing sensitive business discussions. Then you were compromised by receiving unexplained bonuses after problematic events. Finally, you were implicated through direct participation, even if minimal. Marcus described one particularly troubling incident in 2022 when he arrived for a regular appointment at Diddy's Los Angeles home. There was a young artist there, clearly upset, red eyes, shaking hands. Mr. Combs asked me to give this person a haircut too, saying, "Make him look presentable for the camera." I later overheard that this person was recording an apology statement for something. He kept saying he wanted to leave, and Mr. Combs kept reminding him about the consequences we discussed. When asked by prosecutors if he ever considered going to authorities earlier, Marcus' answer revealed the depth of the control system. He would casually mention having friends in every department and knowing when people filed reports the message was clear. There was nowhere to report what I was seeing. That wouldn't get back to Mr. Combs. Marcus explained that the breaking point came when the hidden threats became clear. In early 2023, after a session where I overheard particularly concerning conversations about someone who had been removed from the situation permanently, I told Mr. Combs I was thinking of scaling back our appointments due to my growing business. That night, my shop's windows were broken. It was after this incident that Marcus began secretly cooperating with federal investigators, providing his notes and recordings while still maintaining his role as Diddy's barber. I kept going to those appointments for another 6 months, wearing a wire for some of them. It was the most terrifying time of my life, knowing what could happen if I was discovered. But I also knew that what I was hearing wasn't just unethical, it was criminal, and people were being hurt. Marcus testified that living a double life as both Diddy's barber and an informant took a severe psychological toll. I'd get calls to come do a cut and my hands would shake so badly I could barely pack my supplies. I'd have to pull over on the way to his houses to throw up from anxiety. But I kept going because each session produced more evidence. The pressure got worse when Diddy began to show signs of paranoia about leaks within his organization. He started testing people. He would share slightly different versions of the same story with different members of his team, including me, to see if the information leaked and which version got out. Marcus described how close he came to being discovered. There was one session in April 2023 where Mr. Combs' security team suddenly asked to check everyone for wires. My heart nearly stopped. Fortunately, I wasn't wearing one that day, but it made me realize how dangerous my position had become. Despite these close calls, Marcus continued documenting everything he witnessed. Each time I considered stopping, I would overhear something that reminded me why I needed to continue plans to intimidate witnesses, discussions about destroying evidence, clear threats against people who were cooperating with various investigations. He looked around the courtroom. Mr. Combs didn't just hurt people. He created a culture where loyalty was valued above basic human decency. And that, Marcus said, was what made it impossible for me to remain silent. Marcus paused, glanced at the jury, and leaned closer to the microphone. It wasn't just the illegal activities. It was the human cost, he said. From that moment on, he felt a moral obligation to document everything. He explained that as federal investigations into Diddy got more intense, the conversations he overheard became increasingly desperate. When he arrived for an appointment in September 2023, he found Diddy in a state of upset he had never witnessed before. He was pacing, making calls, yelling at his legal team. When I started to set up my supplies, he grabbed my arm, something he had never done before, and said, "I need to know you're with me, Marcus, all the way, no matter what." This direct confrontation became a turning point. For 15 years, I had been invisible, then useful, then controlled. But in that moment, he was asking for my clear loyalty in a way that felt like crossing a final line. He wanted me to verbally commit to being all the way with him. Marcus described the deep internal conflict he experienced. I had been working with investigators for months, but standing there with his hand gripping my arm, looking into his eyes, I had to make a split-second decision about how to respond. His response, carefully worded, became a crucial moment in maintaining his cover. Bailey. I told him, "I've been with you for 15 years. Your secrets have been safe with me all this time." It was technically true, even though the context had changed dramatically. Mr. Combs was discussing someone who had received a federal subpoena. He told his security chief to make sure that situation is resolved before any testimony happens. And when the security person seemed hesitant, Mr. Combs said, "I don't care what it takes. This is survival." Marcus testified that he immediately reported this conversation to his FBI contacts, who determined that the threat level had gotten much worse. They told me I needed to stop going to appointments immediately, that it wasn't safe anymore. When Diddy's attorney attempted to describe Marcus' testimony as that of an unhappy employee seeking fame or money, Marcus' response was measured but firm. I was paid extremely well for my services, up to $2,000 per haircut. In recent years, plus generous gifts and bonuses, I had access to a world most people only see on Instagram. Coming forward has cost me clients, threatened my business, and forced me to live under federal protection. I didn't do this for money or attention. I did it because after years of hearing about people being threatened, manipulated, and harmed, I couldn't be part of the machine anymore. When asked about his current circumstances, Marcus revealed the full impact of his decision to testify. "I've closed my barber shop. I've moved 3 times in the past year. I've lost contact with friends and some family members for their own safety. My life as I knew it is over, but I would make the same choice again because some burdens are too heavy to carry in silence." Marcus' voice dropped to a quieter, more careful tone. "I stayed quiet for 15 years. I convinced myself that I was just doing my job, that what I overheard wasn't my business. But then people started disappearing from the industry and statements started appearing that I knew contradicted conversations I had witnessed." He said the first time he heard about a former associate of Diddy's being hospitalized after a random attack, he didn't make the connection. Text from Mr. Combs that was clearly meant for someone else. It said problem resolved, wrong person. That was when I realized the conversations I had been hearing weren't just talk. He described feeling like the walls were closing in. I didn't know how extensive Mr. Combs' network was, but once I accepted that these weren't just empty threats, everything else started to connect. Marcus said he spent sleepless nights replaying years of memories, the casual mentions of people who had learned their lesson, the phone calls about cleanups, the conversations about examples being made. It was all a system of fear and control, and I had been both a witness to it and, through my silence, enabling it. He said the breaking point wasn't fear, it was responsibility. I realized that if something happened to someone and I could have prevented it by speaking up, I would never forgive myself. My mother raised me better than that. He told the court that he approached federal authorities himself. I called the FBI field office directly. I told them I have information about Sean Combs that I believe relates to criminal activity, and I need to speak with someone immediately. He looked at the jury. I wasn't just a bystander. I was in a unique position of trust. I was someone who had been allowed to see behind the curtain. Then he looked directly at Diddy for the first time during his testimony, and what I saw was a man who believed his power made him untouchable. At this point, according to courtroom reporters, Diddy's calm completely collapsed. His usual controlled expression gave way to visible distress. His hands covered his face briefly before his attorneys whispered urgently to him. Marcus continued, addressing his testimony to the court rather than directly to Diddy. "For years, Mr. Combs spoke freely in front of me because he never considered that I might understand the implications of what I was hearing. He viewed me as a service provider, not as a person with a conscience and moral responsibility." The prosecutor asked Marcus why. Of all the people in Diddy's circle, he was the one coming forward with such detailed documentation, because barbers exist in a unique space. Marcus replied thoughtfully, "We are physically close to our clients, literally touching them in their personal space, but often socially invisible to them." Mr. Combs would take calls on speakerphone. While I worked, he would have sensitive conversations with visitors. He would give instructions to security personnel, all while I stood there listening and remembering. Marcus then revealed the most damaging evidence, a specific pattern of conversations preceding public scandals or disappearances from the industry. There were at least 7 occasions when I heard Mr. Combs discuss having someone handled or taught a lesson. And within weeks, those individuals either publicly took back statements, withdrew from legal proceedings, or stepped away from the industry entirely. In my documented notes, I have the dates of these conversations and the names mentioned. In several cases, I later heard Mr. Combs clearly take credit for these outcomes. The courtroom fell completely silent as Marcus delivered his final observation. Mr. Combs often told people perception is reality. He believed that if he controlled how people saw him, he controlled reality itself. What he never considered was that someone he didn't really see, someone cutting his hair, standing quietly behind him, might be perceiving a very different reality than the one he thought he was projecting. For his final statement, the judge allowed Marcus to address the court directly. He stood from the witness chair, his posture straight but his expression serious. "I didn't set out to be here today," he began, looking around the courtroom. "I spent 15 years building a career based on trust and discretion. In my profession, keeping secrets is everything. But there's a line between professional discretion and moral participation that I can no longer ignore." Diddy didn't respond. He sat there motionless, his previous calm completely abandoned. His legal team huddled around him, but their urgent whispers seemed to go unheard as he stared blankly ahead. I saw what happened to people who spoke against Mr. Combs. I heard the plans being made, the threats being issued. I watched careers and lives being systematically torn apart, and for too long I told myself it wasn't my place to intervene. Then Marcus addressed something that had been implied throughout his testimony: the personal cost of coming forward. I know what happens next. For me, my business is effectively over. The celebrity clients are already gone. The threats have already started coming in. I'll likely spend years looking over my shoulder. But I can look at myself in the mirror each morning, and that's something I couldn't do while remaining silent. Marcus turned to the jury. If you think this is just about haircuts and overheard gossip, you're missing the bigger picture. This is about a system where wealth and influence allowed consequences to be avoided, where threats replaced accountability, and where countless people have been harmed while those around them stayed silent. I was part of that silence, and today I'm choosing to break it. Marcus gathered his notes and stepped down from the stand without another word. And Diddy, for perhaps the first time in his public life, he appeared completely broken. The carefully maintained image of control and confidence had crumbled entirely, replaced by the look of a man watching his carefully constructed world collapse around him. When Marcus stepped down from the witness stand, he didn't look like someone celebrating a victory. He looked like someone who had finally put down an unbearable weight. The courtroom remained unnaturally still, as if collectively processing the intimate details of a power structure. They had just witnessed being taken apart from the inside. Marcus didn't speak to the press when he exited. There was no grandstanding, no visible satisfaction. He walked out of the courthouse flanked by federal marshals, his future uncertain, but his conscience clear. When asked later by a reporter if he regretted his years of silence, he reportedly responded every day. But regret doesn't change the past. Action changes the future. But outside the courtroom, the world was only beginning to react. The entertainment industry entered a state of collective panic. Phone calls between executives and celebrities surged. Social media accounts went suddenly dark. Public statements of shock and distance from Diddy appeared from people who had been photographed with him just weeks earlier. The most telling reaction came from other service providers to the elite, the drivers, housekeepers, personal chefs, and assistants who, like Marcus, had been treated as invisible presences, while the powerful spoke freely. As one anonymous source told reporters, everyone who works in the shadows is watching this and thinking the same thing. We've all been Marcus at some point. As this story continues to develop, one thing remains clear. The understanding that true power often lies not with those who speak the loudest, but with those who listen the most carefully. If you found this report informative, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for continuing coverage as more witnesses come forward and this landmark case progresses. The truth is finally emerging, and we'll be here to bring it to you as it happens. The era of assumed invisibility is